Regina with AG Designs. So today we are going to cut out a pattern from Sincerely Jen. And this pattern is for the Moondance notepad holder. So this pattern comes in two different sizes. One is for like the junior legal pad and then the regular legal pad. Okay, so I've already cut out the smaller pattern. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the larger one. You can purchase this pattern by going out to sincerelyjen.com, but I will actually put the website here down below in the notes, right? So you can go out there and purchase the pattern. There's also a video that you can watch too, right? That will show you how to construct this notepad holder, which is a very, very, very simple, a simple pattern to make from what I watched, right? And even reading the pattern, it just seems very simple as well. It's not too cumbersome. There's not a lot of parts to this, but we're going to go ahead and cut this pattern, and then we'll need to cut some material, and then we'll be ready to actually make this. So I'm really excited to make this. You know, I have some notepad holders that I have purchased myself, right? But to actually be able to make your own, I just think it's actually something wonderful, right? You can make these and give as gifts to people, you know, for birthdays, holidays, Christmas, whatever. For teachers, right? So you can find some really nice material, maybe with some apples on it or school type, you know, logos, or, you know, just different types of things that's really catered or centered around school, right? And you can make these for your kids' teachers. Those would really be nice gifts for, you know, Teacher Appreciation Week, things like that. So when you're cutting, and this is something I had to learn the hard way. So not sure how advanced you are with cutting patterns, but if you're just now learning how to cut patterns, you know, from a PDF, right? You purchase it online, you print it, and then you need to cut it. Some of these patterns have letters on it. And so there may be two pieces to the pattern, different pages, right? That has the same letter. Well, and a little shape to it, right? Then that just means that you have to, when you cut your pieces out, you have to actually tape those two pieces with the same letter together. And then you'll end up taping them together where the letters are. You'll complete the actual, what is it? Like a, I won't say object, but the print of the letter, right? You'll match those two pieces up together. I just can't think of the word right now to tell you what I'm trying to say, but on both pieces, you will see here you have a B, and then you have a B there, right? So once you cut them, you're gonna match those pieces together to make sure that they flow well, right? And can attach themselves, and then you'll just tape it down. So just a little funny story while I finish cutting this. When I first started learning how to sew, you know, I'd taken a sewing class because I needed to learn how to use the sewing machine, right? And again, you know, made a quick pillow over at Joann's, learned how to use the machine by threading and all that kind of stuff, right? And, you know, after that, of course, I came home and I just knew I was the new Martha Stewart. I was like, I can sew anything. Went out and started buying all kinds of material, going online and purchasing all kinds of patterns, right? Some that say advanced, intermediate, those kind of things. I didn't care. I was just like, I'm going to sew it. One way or another, I'm going to sew it. So in printing off the patterns, I printed my patterns and I cut every piece of it, right? I cut it on the line, did all of that. Then it came down and time to cut the material. Well, because I'd never learned or was trained on anything with cutting patterns, never watched the video before, never spoke to anybody, I just knew what I was doing. Well, I didn't. And so when I cut the patterns, the two pieces that actually had the letters that you have to merge together and tape, I didn't do that. And so I cut the material based upon each size that I cut, right, from the pattern. So I had a session with someone so that we could make a purse together, right? So during this session, you know, she's going through a couple of things with me, and she's like, okay, now let's get our material, you know, and the pieces that you cut. So get piece such and such. And I'm looking on the screen at hers, and I'm looking at what I actually cut. And I'm like, something doesn't seem right. So I said to her, I was like, look at my pieces. Something just not right. So she's like, oh, did you cut on the fold? Like, did you tape your pieces together and then cut one big piece? And I was like, no, I didn't know to do that. So that was a lesson for me to, one, because I'd never learned how to read patterns, didn't know anything about it. The lesson for me with that was, when you purchase these patterns online, go through first and read through the pattern, right? Even if you don't understand some of the verbiage in there, they were using words that I just never understood, right? Because again, this is my first time, a couple times sewing. So, but just go through to get the foundation to see, because a lot of these patterns, at the end, there is a sheet that shows you how to tape these things together and what your pattern, the end result of what your pattern should look like, right? I didn't do any of that because I was a know-it-all when it came down to, oh, I know what I'm doing, in which I really didn't, right? So to not make the same mistakes I made and to not waste material, I will tell you, go all the way to the end after you've printed your patterns and everything, you know, printed the paper out. Go through and read through the pattern and see what you may need to tape together, and just get a flow and an understanding of how the pattern reads and your steps of what you have to do, right? Because it tells you some pieces, especially when you're making handbags, they don't give you a piece to cut for the strap, right? Like the pattern. It's actually written in the pattern where you have to cut extra pieces of material, different shapes or sizes. And so that's why I say go through and read everything first, because the patterns that you cut may not be it, right? You may need extra material, and it'll tell you cut, you know, 11 by 8 or whatever size, or 2 strips of 5 by 6, whatever. Just like I said, just make sure you go through and read all that. And when it comes down to at the end, after you've cut all your pieces out, then look and see if there are any that needs to have a complete square, triangle, star, circle, right? Because there are 2 pieces to it. Some of these patterns have multiple pieces that you have to glue together to be able to make one piece to the pattern. Excuse me. So just review everything first before you start to cutting. So you do not mess up material like I did, right? I mean, and the material I was using was not cheap. So, of course, I've been able to, you know, kind of use the material for other projects, where it's asking for smaller cuts. I've been able to kind of reuse some of that, but it was a big lesson learned for me. And again, like I said, I kind of learned the hard way, right? So, and she was extremely patient with me, you know, and letting me tape my pieces together, and waiting for me to recut my material. So I was really appreciative that day, you know, and then she walked me hand in hand through the pattern. So because it was my first time and had never read through a pattern, she actually, what I did was I printed the entire PDF file with the instructions, right? So that I could start taking some notes on it too. Because I'm more so kind of like a visual learner. if I see something done once or twice, then I can kind of memorize and do it without having to read instructions. That's just how I learn, right? And I won't say if that's good or bad. For some people it might be good, for some it might not be. But I was able to actually take notes, and it was certain words that were listed that I just didn't understand, right? It was sewing terms. And, you know, she took the time out and actually made sure that I understood exactly what it meant, right? Like I had no clue about seam allowances and things like that. And that really comes in handy, and you really should follow what the pattern says in regards to, you know, seam allowances when you're sewing, because you could actually sew something thinking I'll just sew it however I think I should sew it, right? And it's not the right seam allowance. So now you've sewed it so much where it won't match up to your next piece that you need to sew it or attach it to, because one, you might have made it too small. So if the pattern calls for a 1/4 inch seam allowance, that's what you do. An 1/8 of a seam allowance, 3/8, whatever. That is what you do. Do not take shortcuts when it comes to these patterns, because you want your outcome to be what it should be, right? So just, like I said, just try and read through it to get your foundation. And then a lot of these pattern makers or bag makers who make patterns, they also make videos to some of these patterns too, right? So watch the video once or twice just so that you get a clear understanding. If you're one who likes to print all of the instructions, print it off, watch the video, make your notes. So therefore, when you're ready to do it, you can kind of follow the instructions and make it without watching the video, right? So I'll tell you, on some of these patterns that come with a video, like I said, I'll watch it. I'll watch the video maybe once or twice just to get my foundation down and kind of memorizing, right? And then I'll make the actual item. But there are others, not just the person who made this pattern, but there are others who actually have made the bag or whatever you're actually trying to sew. They'll make videos too. And so do your search on YouTube. Put in that actual purse that you're trying to make, shirt, jacket, whatever it is, the pattern name, put that in a search, and I'm telling you, you'll come up with so many people who have already made it, and they've made videos to it, right? To show you how to do it step by step. So that kind of helps you too when you're first learning, so that you can get your basis and foundation down to, you know, learning terms and seeing how things really should go, right? There's a lot of people out there who, before they even make the purse or whatever it is, they'll say, you know, come cut with me, right? And so you can learn how to cut the fabric, especially when you have directional fabric, like the prints are going a certain way, and you want that to line up the right way when you're making, you know, whatever it is. Watch and see how they cut these things, right? So that you know when you're cutting your material, instead of folding left to right, you may have to fold from top to bottom, right? Just so you can keep your pattern going the right way. So, like I say, I've learned the hard way, and I'm still learning. I am still a student when it comes down to learning how to really follow a pattern versus having to, you know, watch a video to learn how to walk through the pattern or to sew the object. So I've been sewing now since last July. So I am a crafter by nature. I do all types of other things, you know, with sublimation, epoxy, vinyl, such as iron-on vinyl, that kind of thing, or permanent vinyl. So, you know, I've done the tumblers and just all kinds of stuff, t-shirts, all of that. And I find that sewing actually is what has taken over my interest, right? So it's, I don't know, I guess it's kind of gratifying and satisfying for me when I get to actually see the end result, because I won't say doing tumblers and, you know, ironing on t-shirts is just a no-brainer, but it's easier. You just wrap your paper. If you're doing sublimation and sublimating a tumbler, you know, you're just lining that up around your tumbler, and you're using a tumbler press or the little oven to actually burn the image onto your tumbler, right? And or a t-shirt, you know, you're just laying, you're measuring and you're laying down the vinyl, and then you're just heat pressing it. With sewing, it's a little different because you have your pieces that you must sew together to complete that look, right? And for me, I just love seeing the end result, and especially when it's something that is like an advanced level, and seeing that I can actually do it, or I actually did it, right? That is just so satisfying to me. And it's a stress reliever as well, because you're concentrating so much on making that specific item that whatever stress you've had for the day, that's basically gone, because now you're pouring it into making this associated item. So I just love it. I love, love, love sewing now. So I've cut all of my pieces, and let me just bring this down some. So I've cut all of my pieces. Now, when you're cutting your pieces, you can use cardstock if you want to run that through your printer. So I cut this on my Workforce, my Epson Workforce 7840. It's just a regular inkjet. You can cut this on a laser jet as well, but you can use regular paper, color paper, cardstock, whatever you want. Now, I've seen where a lot of women, they will cut it on cardstock and then they laminate it, right? So that the pattern pieces won't tear. You can probably wipe off of the laminate pretty easily if you get your ink on it. You know, like when you're tracing the piece of the pattern onto the material. You'll be, I won't say you won't cut it, like cut the paper when you're actually trying to cut your material, because some people are really good at cutting their patterns by just laying their pattern on the material, and instead of tracing with chalk or pen or pencil, they actually just cut right directly from the pattern on the fabric. I've tried that several times, and sometimes it works for me, sometimes it does not, right? So my eyesight is not the greatest. As you can see, I wear glasses. And so sometimes I'm having a difficulty time of actually seeing the end, right? So with cutting directly with the fabric. So there has been times where I've actually cut the pattern, right? Meaning the paper, when I should not have. Or I cut larger than what the pattern is calling for. So to get away from all of that now, if it says folded, I fold it over, I get my pen, and I have different things. I do have the chalk. I use chalk more so on dark colors like black or blue, navy blue, hunter green, those kind of colors when I'm doing the outline and tracing, so that I can see it when it's time to cut. If I have lighter colors that I'm cutting, or the back of vinyl, so the back of vinyl sometimes is normally white or tan, right? And so I'll use a pen. I'll use a pen to trace, and that helps me better with my eyesight and seeing when it's time to cut the pattern out, right, on the fabric. So just be careful too sometimes when you're using pen, depending upon how the fabric is. If it's cloth, you may want to get some of the pens that, like I have these pens, they come in, well, this one is blue and pink, and I have one that's white also, where they're removable ink or invisible ink. It evaporates, or you can just wet it a little bit and the color will come off. So you can use those kind of pens. They have different colored chalks right? So I have that too, where, you know, chalks might come in white or pink or blue. So you can use those, and it has a little brush on the end, a hard brush. So you can kind of brush away some of that chalk. But who's going to see it, right? Because you're going to end up sewing it and then having lining over that too. So really no one will see it. But I will just say, just be careful though, when you have lighter fabrics and you use a actual pen, because that ink could go through on your fabric, right, to the front side. Some pens do bleed. So just be very careful when, you know, using pens to outline your fabric. So, like I said, I try and tell you things because I've gone through it already and have made some mistakes. So, to prevent you from wasting material and or making mistakes, I'll just try and tell you, you know, things that I have gone through. Okay, so what I'm going to do is there's only 2 pieces that has to be taped together. So I'm just going to take these 2 pieces together. And again, there's this pieces that are outlined with B, and you can see the little bubble here in black. I'm just going to make sure I line that up correctly and tape it. Now, when I'm doing my taping on these, of course, I tape from the front. And then sometimes I might go back and tape behind it too, just to give it some extra stability. Now, I print, of course, you know, of course you're going to print these patterns, right, so that you can actually cut them. But when I store my patterns, I actually store them in manila folders. And so what I do is I write down the maker's name first, and then I'll have the bag name or whatever I'm cutting. So I sew handbags, okay? Handbags and wallets, things like that. So I'm not interested in sewing clothing, okay? So I have purchased a gazillion patterns, and I've started recently, you know, printing quite a bit of them so that I can get them all printed and cut and stored away in their folder. So when it's time for me to, okay, I want to learn how to do a new purse, I pull one from my arrangement there and learn how to sew it. So what I do is, like I said, on each manila folder, and I'll show you here in just a second, on each manila folder, I will actually list the maker's name first, and then I put the pattern name behind it. Now for this pattern, because it's 2 different sizes, it's a junior and the legal size, I didn't want to mix up the pattern pieces. Even though you should be able to tell the difference in the heights of these patterns, I wanted to still keep them separate. So I've made 2 folders, one for the junior and then one for the regular legal size. The junior one I already cut, and I have those pieces here in the folder, okay? So I have a box that I store all my patterns in. So, and I store them alphabetized, right, by the maker's name. So when I'm ready, I'll just, you know, put this in my box in alphabetical order. And therefore, like I said, if today I go through my Rolodex online of a pattern that I'm looking for that I've purchased, I'll go to my box, pull out that folder, and then I have those pattern pieces. Now, don't be like me and purchase so much that you purchase the same pattern again. So what I've started doing, because I've done this a lot with clothing too, right? When I order clothes and shoes, things like that, I tend to order in 3s. That's my number for whatever reason. And so what I have done in the past is I have ordered the same thing over, whether it was a pair of shoes, it was a shirt, or whatever. So what I've started doing with my patterns is on my computer, I've created an Excel file. So every time I order a pattern, I first put it into my email folder called orders, right? When I go to download it, then I have a folder in documents, right, where I store my Excel folder and my Excel spreadsheet. So within there, I have, first off, in the folder, I will create a different folder for each make that I purchase. So when you go to my documents, you will see various folders listed there of the maker's name, whether it's Shambhala, Sincerely Jen, So Easy, whatever, or whomever it is. I make that folder. Then I save every pattern that I've purchased online, that PDF, to the associated folders. And this way, it helps me to go and look and see if I have that pattern first before I purchase. Now, I do have an Excel file as well that I started putting all of the maker names and the patterns that I've purchased also. So I have something quickly at my fingertips that I can go and say, oh, I've already purchased that one, so I don't need to repurchase it again. You know, that way as well. So I'll just, whatever kind of mode you need to have, just make sure you're not buying these patterns over and over, because you can save them to your hard drive and reprint as needed. I will tell you, some of these makers, when they sell you the pattern online on their site, like when you go to my account on their site, you will see some of them will tell you you can only download this pattern 5 times, 3 times, or what have you. Then after that, you're going to have to repurchase it, right? So if you save it to your hard drive, the actual PDF, you can download it and print it. Well, not download it because you've already downloaded it one time. You can print it as many times as you need to. So if you mistakenly cut your pieces, tear your pieces, you know, spill water on them or whatever, you can go back into your folder, pull it up and reprint it and cut as many times as you need to. I'm only saving if I have to go back to the maker, right, site and download again. I'm only saving that for if my computer crashes and or my little, what do you call it? Terabyte that I'm storing things on as well. If that crashes, then I still have, you know, enough tries to go and download again, right? But I'll tell you, just be very careful with that and make sure that you look and see if there is a limit to how many times you can download it after you've purchased it. Now, on some other maker sites, it'll say unlimited downloads, right? It doesn't mean that you can share it, because you should not share these patterns, right? Whomever is making it, each person who wants it needs to purchase, right? Just like if you're making these bags or whatever you're making and you're selling, you don't want somebody to get that piece and make money off of, or it's free, right? For them, you're in the business of making money. So you need to follow that quorum with these makers who are creating these patterns. So I know we have sisters and friends and things like that who's also sewing, but each person should go out and purchase their own pattern. Don't cheat the makers, okay? Because you wouldn't want that done to you. And they'll tell you too, it's not to be shared. They'll say, some of them will say you can create a video and show how to make it or sew or whatever you're doing. And you may have to mention their name, right? When you load your video, you may have to say where to purchase it from, or the maker's name, you know, giving them the credit, right? But they will be very specific on their site as to what needs to be done or what you have to do if you're purchasing from them, when it comes down to, you know, making associated videos of how to sew it, cutting and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, just read everything, and just make sure you're following the sewing etiquette, see, right, around the world when purchasing patterns from someone. So back to cutting this pattern. I have cut all of my pieces. Okay. So I will normally just store into my folder, and another day or later on in the day, I'll actually cut material. But I think what I want to do is move on to the next step. I really want to make this one tonight. And then I'll probably tomorrow make the smaller versions just so I can, you know, really see the difference, right? Plus, I also need to go and purchase some pads also, right? So, for these, the junior size and the regular 9.5 by, what is it, 8.5 by 14 or something like that, right? So, what we're going to do Actually, it's 8 3/4 by 14 for the legal size. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop this particular video, find the fabric that I want to use for these patterns. Now, she recommends that you use a non, what do you call it, frailing material, right? Because when you cut, you don't want your ends to kind of like cotton. When you cut sometimes cotton, you have the little lines or the pieces of stringy, you know, pieces hanging from the material. So you want to use vinyl, faux vinyl or faux leather, or actual leather when using or making this actual notepad holder. Okay, so I have a gazillion pieces of fabric that are faux leather. So I'm just gonna find a nice simple colored one or patterned one that I want to use. As everybody knows, my favorite color is pink. So for this first one, I'll probably make me a pink one or something with some pink flowers in it or something like that. So I'm just going to go through my vinyl. Like I said, pick out some material. Go ahead and make another video for you showing how I actually trace out my material on the vinyl and cut it and get it ready to actual sew it, right? It's not much sewing to this. It's a lot of taping and placing it in the position of where it needs to go, but there's not a lot of sewing to this one at all. But the end result is just absolutely beautiful. So meet me back on the next video and you can see how I actually trace my material and cut it out. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in and watching me as I cut this pattern, and let's go ahead and prepare to actually make this notepad. See you in a few minutes. Bye-bye.